What is up, guys? It's your birthday boy, Rick Kakis. Well, technically yesterday, but today we're going to be showcasing a gun type within Destiny 2 that you absolutely want to keep your eye on, want to maybe start farming, getting some god rolls, because this gun type is getting substantially better in the upcoming Season 17 and will likely break into the meta when that new season starts. And so, let's get started. But just before we do, guys, that silky smooth background gameplay comes from my brand new PC built by Apex Gaming PCs. They've partnered with me to bring you guys 3 different models of Destiny 2 ready PCs. So if you're in the market for a new PC, click the link in the description down below, and don't forget to use code KAKISHD to save up to $250. Alright, now this information about this gun type and the changes in Season 17 is all coming from the absolutely massive weekly update that released last week. It was probably the biggest weekly update that Bungie ever released. Like, the video is over 40 minutes. Like, it is absolutely insane how much stuff is changing next season. But one of the big winners that absolutely caught my eye was heavy machine guns. Now, currently, they're really not a part of either the PvE or PvP metas. But it's not like they've always been bad. In fact, there were times where machine guns were at the top of the meta. When they first came out, people were utilizing the Thunderlord to one-phase cheese Riven. Do you know how many few guns in Destiny history were capable of doing that? Machine guns were one of them. I also remember when the Xenophage was the go-to heavy weapon for Grandmaster Nightfalls. So again, it's not like these weapons have always been bad, and that's why you always need to pay attention to machine gun nerfs. They're just a little bit away to retaining that either top slot or competing for that top slot. And this buff blew my mind away. So what's actually happening is kind of 2 different things. So first off, they've increased the damage by 40% against PvE enemies, however, only 20% against bosses. So let's just pause for a second here. 40% damage increase is almost unheard of, guys. Like, the closest thing I can compare to that buff in recent memory was the primary exotic weapon buff, where they started doing 40% more damage against red bar enemies. And this made a pretty big difference, not in Grandmasters as we're finding out because of champions, but certainly in the legendary difficulty campaign for the Witch Queen. You saw a ton of people using things like the Teraba, the Graviton Lance, the Osteo Strigo is being used a ton in that arguably endgame content. Like, people really found that 40% damage buff made a pretty big difference. But that buff was just against red bar enemies. That meant your weapons, your exotic weapons, were doing literally no more damage against any yellow bar you would come across. But machine guns, it just says PvE enemies. So that is every red bar, that is every yellow bar, that is, it should be every champion you come across, 40% more damage. Now, of course, the boss at the very end of the Nightfall, whatever you're doing, that will only be a 20% damage buff, but still a 20% damage buff against bosses. Every single machine gun is getting focus fire constantly all the time against bosses. Again, I really think this is a substantial buff we're seeing. Now, there is an exception here. The Xenophage and the Grand Overture, they're going to get the 40% damage buff against, everything except bosses. They won't get the 20% boss buff. Okay, so with that information, what machine guns should you be looking to acquire and utilize in Season 17? Well, first and foremost, the one that comes to my mind right away has got to be the Thunderlord. Now, I did make a similar video to this when machine guns got like a 20% damage buff a couple seasons ago, I believe. So they've still got that buff. If you haven't used machine guns in like a year, in Season 17, they're going to be like 60% better than the last time you used them. But the Thunderlord, it is getting that 20% boss damage buff, and I mean, again, this thing was one-phasing Riven at one point. Not only is it going to generate lightning bolts for continuous damage on a target, so that's just more DPS than normal. It's also going to increase its rate of fire as you continue to shoot it, which again is just more DPS. This thing is just meant for a DPS monster. It has multiple perks that augment that. So now 40% more, this thing might be taking down champions. It certainly can deal with ads already, so I can't wait to use this moving forward. Another exotic that I really think you got to keep an eye on is actually the Xenophage. Even though it isn't getting that 20% boss damage buff, it's getting something else. Because its rate of fire is going from 100 back to the original value of 120. And even though the damage is coming down just a little bit to compensate, that still means more overall damage per second with the Xenophage. Just because of the rate of fire change, you put the 40% against champions and everything else on top of that, yeah, this could be a real contender. But let's move on to some legendary weapons and the god rolls you want to look out for. First thing I'm going to mention here, guys, 7th Seraph Saw. These are a little bit hard to get right now. You can farm Dares of Eternity technically to get them from the final chest, or you can keep an eye on the Gunsmith and Zur, but honestly, these can get a Clown cartridge and either Vorpal weapon or firing line, and they can make Warmind cells. Even though Warmind cells got a nerf, if these are like one-shotting every single red bar in high-level content because of that 40% buff, yeah, these could be spitting out Warmind cells, and that's something to absolutely pay attention to. Another interesting one here is the Commemoration. This comes from the Deepstone Crypt raid, and mainly it can get the insane raid unique perk, which is Reconstruction. This weapon slowly reloads itself over time up to double capacity. So when it's stowed, it's basically like a little bit of a slower auto-loading holster. It'll slowly keep reloading until eventually it will double the magazine. So the Commemoration with an extended mag perk and I think a backup mag and Reconstruction can get to 150 rounds. That is just insane. And remember, guys, with this and the next weapon on our list, raids are going to be farmable. The old raids are having a weekly rotation in Season 17, and you can play Deepstone Crypt again and again and again and keep getting loot on the same character. So any raid weapon is now going to be extremely farmable in Season 17 as long as they're a part of those rotating raids. So again, the next weapon we're looking at here is the Corrective Measure from the Vault of Glass, again farmable. So this weapon can get quite a few great rolls for ad killing, subsistence, where it gets ammo back for getting kills, plus one for all. This would be absolutely decimating groups of ads. But with that 40% damage buff, like, do you even need to build it towards ad clearing? Frankly, the base version is going to be able to decimate red bars. So another role I'm really interested in is the combo of rewind rounds, where this weapon's magazine will refill from reserves based on the number of hits. And then you've actually got high impact reserves where the rounds at the end of the magazine deal more damage. So that is an absolute wombo combo. We also see this combo present on the Prettious Sniper from Vogue, and the damage output there is significant. It means you can be shooting your Corrective Measure, and about halfway through your magazine, high impact reserves is going to kick in, and you're going to be doing more and more damage until the last few rounds of the magazine are doing like 25-26% more damage, pretty substantial. And then if you land those shots, you instantly refill back to half of your magazine because of rewind rounds. So that means that next, half of your magazine is all doing high impact reserves damage, and then when that's done, you refill like a quarter of your magazine. You shoot that. That's all doing a high impact reserves damage. So you can shoot like 100 or more rounds, and most of those rounds will be doing extra damage thanks to high impact reserves. Really something to watch out for, especially with the 20% added damage against bosses. Another great one that a lot of you guys might have thanks to the most recent Dawning event is the Avalanche. This thing can get some phenomenal rolls. It can actually get auto-loading holster or subsistence, and frankly I have both, I was lucky enough, combined with Vorpal weapon. Even though Vorpal is only a 10% increase on heavy weapons against bosses, now it's 30% more than the base version, and especially being able to whip this out. Someone's using a divinity, you land all precision shots, you destroy a champion, you put it away, deal with other guys, autoloading kicks in, you engage the next champion, you're full of ammo. That's a pretty good gameplay loop right there. Now, a significantly harder to get one is going to be the Swarm, an old Nightfall weapon, but the even older version could get the Bottomless Grief perk before it was retired, and this just straight up increases your magazine. So that plus an extended mag perk gives you 74 rounds in the magazine base. Like, you don't even have a backup mag on, you can use Adept Big Ones, and then you have Vorpal Weapon. That's a lot of damage in one magazine. Now, something else that's definitely a little bit more easy to farm, guys, is going to be the Moon Machine Gun Find Memorial. So this can actually get auto-loading. We've talked about how that's good. Plus Frenzy. Frenzy's a really interesting one here for machine guns because not only is it going to kick in and be great against adds, but it's also going to activate its 15% damage bonus as long as you're taking and dealing damage in a boss fight or against champions or so on. So it might be a little bit more versatile than something like Vorpal Weapon, especially when combined with autoloading because it can activate when the weapon is stowed, and so when you whip it out, it's fully reloaded. Frenzy's automatically active if you've been in a gunfight. That's pretty saucy. And guys, speaking of all that, probably the biggest addition recently is the fact that there's a craftable machine gun. The Recurrent Impact. Not only is it going to get that fantastic land tank origin trait where you're going to get more damage resistance and resilience, but it can get some saucy rolls. It can get stuff like subsistence, which you may want to put on, but importantly, it can get that frenzy perk. And just like we saw with a Find Memorial, you know, that is going to allow you to not only take out adds easier, but can be utilized potentially in a boss damage phase. And traditionally, these 900 rounds per minute machine guns haven't really seen a ton of play, haven't really had a purpose, but they certainly can belt out a lot of damage very quickly. So this is, again, something to keep an eye out on. And again, the fact that it's craftable, you can guarantee your roll, is really something promising. So guys, those are the machine guns I'm keeping an eye on, and really the reasons why I'm keeping an eye on machine guns. I think they have a good chance to be utilized in some endgame content coming next season. We hardly ever see a damage increase as big as 40%, so that's really blowing my mind. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.